Good morning, guys. Welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. So it is a beautiful, cool spring morning, but we are set to be mid 80s today. So it's getting really hot really quickly. We are just in the beginning of May. So it's kind of typical for us, but we are just still adjusting ourselves to these hotter temperatures. We all have had sunburns. We're all, just sore, doing a lot of work. Spring is definitely keeping us on our toes. We are incredibly busy. We have a lot of work that we have to get done today. We've got some baseball games this afternoon, so I've got to get working here. But yesterday, I had the kids in the garden weeding. Everything's growing so fast because of the longer daylight hours. So the weeds are really just popping up everywhere. So they were doing that. Plus, I had my oldest daughter harvesting strawberries. Every day, we've been bringing up colanders and colanders of strawberries. And I have been making strawberry jam with that. So I just finished my second big batch of strawberry jam last night. And as I was walking down here this morning, I just see that there's tons of red berries everywhere. I still have some things that I need to plant out into the garden. Basically, everything's been direct sowed. My green beans, my cucumbers, my squashes, my melons I put up by the house. I'm just kind of utilizing every space that I can. Those bigger vining crops kind of take up a lot of area, so I try to put my melons at least up there. So we did that. Those are all sprouting. My soybeans that I put in the garden, they all rotted. They were only 3 years old. I thought for sure I'd get some germination. I got nothing, but that's okay. I'll order some. We have such a long season that I can definitely order some and get those in the ground. But I do have a lot of things to plant out that I've started, like my okra, my sweet potatoes I'm still hardening off. And then I also had about 50 tomato plants left over that I needed to get in the ground. So what I did is I bought some raised beds from Amazon. I was looking at the Vigo ones to try to find something comparable to that. Their prices are really expensive, and I was not crazy about their customer service since it's very AI based. And so I ordered some beds from Amazon, and I'll put the exact name and maybe a link below in the description so you guys can see. But I got them. They're white. They're 8 foot by 2 foot by 1.5 feet tall, and I got those mainly for those tomato plants that I needed to plant out. I'm putting them in a trellis area where I used to have some containers at. I moved the containers, and so we built those beds yesterday. I'm actually fairly impressed with them. They did scratch just a little bit as we were putting them together, but we tried to be very careful, and so we're going to be filling those, and I'm going to be picking and choosing of those 50 tomatoes what I want to put in there, because I'm probably only going to be able to get about 14 tomatoes in that area. So I won't be able to get all 50, but I'm sure I'll find a spot for those. But yeah, so spring has just really been kicking our butt here. Lots and lots of work. Today we have to do so much mowing and weed whacking. Like I said, everything's growing like crazy, and so I feel like it's every week that we're weed whacking and mowing, and that just takes a ton of time and a ton of effort. In fact, last week when I was weed whacking, I got into a patch of poison ivy. So I actually have poison ivy on my neck here. I'm fully covered everywhere else, but I did not cover my neck. So I've been struggling with trying not to scratch that. But I think that that's something that a lot of people don't realize is how much work this lifestyle is, how much work it takes to turn soil over into a bed. How much work it takes to lug wheelbarrows of soil, wheelbarrows of harvest, buckets of peppers, things like that. How much energy it takes to wrestle a goat because they have something on their chin and you're trying to treat them for it. I did that with Cream this morning. She had this little scab on her chin. And it just has not gone away, so I've been treating it with something called chlorhexidine. It's just basically I don't know if it's an antibacterial or what it is, but it basically gets rid of all types of bacterial infections, things like staph and things like that. So I've kind of been treating her there, and she just, picked her head up and just threw me into the side of their little enclosure there. So anyways, it just takes a lot of effort, and it's just a lot of physical labor, but people don't realize that. They're watching YouTube videos, they're interested in it, they're entertained by it, they want to do these things, and it all looks really good on camera. We're not showing you the moments of great frustration. We're not showing you, the aggravated attitudes and things like that. You can look all over Instagram and see these beautiful women with makeup and hair done in white cotton gowns, with a baby strapped on them, and they're harvesting all these things. Then they're going up to their house and they're making sourdough bread. They're making their own pasta with the spinach that they just harvested. They're making everything from scratch, and they just make it look so incredibly effortless. And I think that's part of the problem with people trying to get into homesteading. So many people have come into this lifestyle, and I think it's fantastic, but people get burnt out so quickly. They say within 2 years. A lot of people are burnt out, and if it's not within 2 years, it's within that 6-year time frame. If you can make it to the 7th year of homesteading, they say you're golden. People leave the city, they purchase this land, and they have all of these dreams. Things like, I want to get honeybees, and I want a huge garden, and I want a Jersey cow because I'll get that cream layer and I'll be able to make my own butter. We want to do this and we want to do that. We want to start doing a medicinal herb garden, and they just have such big dreams, and that's great. But they get going way too fast. And I say that if you're getting into this lifestyle, you kind of just need to get to your property and just give it some time. Look it over, see how the sun falls on the property, see the different areas. Just breathe for a minute. Don't go get an entire herd of goats or an entire herd of sheep before you know what you're doing with that. Definitely try to get a mentor in those areas, because you're going to find that there's not going to be a vet that can come out. These animals are highly susceptible to parasites and other infections and things like that. You've got to trim their hooves. If you're not trimming their hooves, you've got to get a farrier. And it's really not that hard to trim their hooves. You just need to know how to do it so that you're not causing them injury, because that's a spot where they're stepping in manure and everything else, and just highly susceptible to disease and infection if you're injuring their hoof when you're trimming it. And so also people kind of get into this lifestyle, and they go into debt over it, right? They buy the tractor because they've got fields that need to be bush hogged. They want animals, so maybe they've got to build a barn and things like that. So we've got our goats. We just simply built them a small housing structure. That was really easy. And we also built a bigger structure that we could stand up in, and that is where I milk them, because when it's raining or the weather is not good, I still need a place to milk them and get them up on that milk stand. But we don't have a barn here, and I'm not going to walk them all the way up to my garage. That's too much effort. So we made a movable milking barn, and Nate put a little solar panel in it for me, so that during the winter months when it's dark in there, I can just click that light on when I'm milking them in the evenings, and I have light. And so have a little shelf with all of my supplies there, so it makes it really, really easy. And then wherever we're rotationally grazing them, we just pull that structure. Now their housing structure we can move by hand if we needed to. We are using the tractor for that. But people are going into debt to get into this lifestyle. And, by the time 2 years comes, they are overworked, they're tired. They threw that garden in there and threw a bit of compost on it, not realizing how aggressive pasture grass is, and so the garden is full of weeds. They can't use any sort of spray, whether it's organic or if it's a chemical based, because they've got bees, and things are just not looking good. And so, they sell the homestead, and they go back to the city because it's just too much work. So my advice to you is to take it slow. When I started out with goats, I got just simply 2 goats. And it was a learning curve. As soon as I got them home, they got something called coccidia, which is a parasite in their intestine. And when these animals go through stress, like a transition of a new home, a lot of times that can, rear its ugly head. And so we were having to feed them electrolytes and medicine every day for a week to clear that up. Just everything, but now we're in it for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now, so our goats kid every year. That is still scary to me, but we do it because I feel like every opportunity, it's a learning experience. The garden, my first year, I put in $3,600 worth of soil, and it was all contaminated with persistent herbicide. That was a huge blow. And so, you know, the garden we definitely did go in really big, and I wasn't exactly prepared for how much work that was. But we muscled through it. We're typically pretty hardworking, and I think a lot of people who get into this lifestyle are. But I think without knowing how much work it is, without the dedication, without the support from your spouse and things like that. You know, if you've got someone working full time and they don't want to come home on their weekends and work all weekend, and I don't blame them. That's what Nate does, and I feel so bad for him because he's working at night. You know, he works all day, he comes home, he has dinner, he works at night in his office or sending emails or whatever, and then on the weekends he's here, you know, just working his little heart out. And it's a lot of work, but we're hoping that once we get everything kind of in, the infrastructure in, everything, that we will be good to go and things will kind of settle down. And we have fine-tuned things over the years, made things a little bit simpler. We're not growing the novelty crops. Those just take a lot of extra time. We're not keeping a ton of goat kids because that's just extra mouths to feed. Nate has spent a lot of time on the irrigation and infrastructure on this property, so that has been a huge help. I don't have to irrigate the garden myself. That's all automated. The orchard is now all completely finished and automated. But yeah, just, I mean, fencing, animals, just breathe when you get onto your property, and just kind of, you can dream and think about things, but get the infrastructure in first, learn a bit, find a mentor, and then go from there. If you want to put some garden beds in, you know, it's not too much of a big deal if you lose a few tomato plants or things like that. But as far as the animals and then the orchards, you know, that's a huge learning curve. In fact, I saw a commercial from Fast Growing Trees, and it said, you know, have you ever dreamed of having key lime trees in your backyard where you can just pick your own limes? Well, it's simple. Go on to Fast Growing Trees, pick the tree you want, any fruit tree, put it in the ground, and you'll have fresh fruit for years to come. And I think, no, it's actually not that simple. They didn't even talk about digging the hole 3 times as big as the root ball. They didn't talk about what to put in that hole, compost or whatnot. They didn't talk about how to prune that tree. They didn't talk about the fact that fruit trees are highly susceptible to disease, as well as pests. So, like for my fruit trees, I have to spray them with fungicides, and each fungicide has a FRAC code, which means its mode of action, how it works. And you have to rotate those fungicides so that there is not resistance built up, along with pesticides. You can use natural or you can use synthetic chemical formulas, but whatever you're doing, you have to rotate that. You need to know the mode of actions, and it is extremely confusing because if you don't do that, I guess you can bag the fruit. That's a ton of bags, and that's a ton of effort to do. But if you're not doing something, chances are you're going to lose your harvest. I've lost all my harvest the past 2 years because of this little bug that burrows in and lays its eggs inside the peaches, and then they start to rot. In fact, this year I have fire blight on my pears that I noticed, just a small bit of that. So I've been spraying those with fungicide as well. But yeah, these are all things you've got to learn, guys. So just take it slow, get some books, dream, sit on that front porch, and just enjoy that pasture. Just enjoy the view out your backyard before you actually have to do anything, and kind of decide what you want to do and start small. So that's my advice to you guys, to not get burnt out, because this is the season where it happens. Like I said, we're all sunburned, we're sore, we're grumpy. And so anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I have probably an entire day of mowing and weed whacking to do, and so that's what's waiting for me. So anyways, guys, thank you so much. I will see you in the next video.